Hello everybody! I've been working on some other videos for a while, hugely enjoyed myself, but it's time I turn my attention to Satisfactory now. Which means, let's find out what we can see in the gameplay video Jace did to showcase the conveyor belt. Let's start with how shit Jace is with the animals. Lizard Doggo doesn't let Jace pet him, and Jace brutally takes the cover away from the little blind bird when all it was doing was trying to get some lunch pretending to be a plant. The bird stoically just moves on, demonstrating a grand spirit. Jace is also mean to me personally. I know it, as he often throughout the video will just tell us what things do instead of letting us analyze them for the video. I work hard to figure things out and then he just blurts it out. Like, really? Seriously though, we get a lot of gameplay and game information out of this video. Let's start with production figures. In order of presentation in the video, we can see that one reinforced iron plate is made every 10 seconds and requires 3 iron plates and 30 screws. 60 iron ore is produced every minute or 1 every second. 1 iron ingot is produced every 2 seconds and needs 1 iron ore. 10 screws are made in 4 seconds and need 1 iron rod. 1 iron plate is made of 2 iron ingots over 4 seconds, and 1 iron rod needs 4 seconds to be made, needing 1 iron ingot. Out of that, we can see already what we need to keep the reinforced iron plate going forever. It's not a good ratio between all of this. With the quantities listed above as well as the production times, we would need 2 such mines to feed 3 smelters, which can feed 6 constructors, and then these will be split in 2 by 2 by 2, making plates, screws and rods respectively. Then we have the capacity to feed the assembler without ports. This uses all the ingots and all of the rods, but leaves some of ore, plates and screws as excess. It's the factor 3 in the plates and screws in the reinforced iron plate recipe required that does that. The same cannot be said about the power though. However weirdly it is stated that the biomass burner consumes energy by the tooltip, bug number 1, it is actually producing 20 megawatts of power every 0.75 seconds. On separate instances of the video, we see other consumptions, again in order of presentation. The miner needs 5 megawatts per second, the smelter needs 4 megawatts per 2 seconds, the constructor needs 4 megawatt every 4 seconds regardless of what it is making, iron plates, rods or screws, and the assembler needs 12 megawatts every 10 seconds. You might ask why this power consumption is based on production rate, but I guess that is a question for the designer of Satisfactory. All I know is that it is so, as I've done the math shown here, where we see that only if the consumption is as I stated does it balance out. If the consumption was per second, then we would need a second biomass burner to cover the remaining 13 megawatts needed. As it stands, we are 15.666, repeating of course, megawatts in surplus, and that is why we only need the one. So let's move on to gameplay. First up, the icons have changed since the vehicle's presentation. These new icons shown here are changed much from the previous version, and they do look better if I do say so myself. We have the construct, demolish, flashlight, comms or messages, emails, and finally tab is for inventory, I assume. There's nothing ambiguous about that at all. Let's run through the video then and see what we can glean from it. All the below are in presentation order. I'm taking you on the ride into how I noticed them and how I made the connections in some cases. First up, we see red power indicators flickering. These have been the subject of a lot of discussions, and in this video we get some answers. Red flickering light thus far means no power. We first notice a level of detail change here, where closing in shows us much more detail and not exactly in a fluid manner. This is typical though of engines, and we could hope that this will be smoothed out. We then have the first confirmation of the assembler machine with name and model on screen. We also see the configuration window open for the assembler, noticing that we can select between recipes and production tabs, while mousing over the product brings up a detailed view of the product with production figures. Next up is another LOD flicker, and while I did count all of them that I could see in this video, it doesn't exactly make for exciting videography, so this will be the last one I will show. Next up, we see the miner model and its name, Miner MK1, which can let us know that there are more MKs in the future and that it is not an iron or copper or diamond miner, so they should be able to mine everything. As Jace makes note of the iron patch the miner is sitting on, we notice that a GUI informs us that we can use the E button to mine iron ourselves. So we could collect iron without the need for a miner, and even before the portable miner, which is not featured in this video. So look out for these patches when you are hunting for iron. As Jace then goes to configure the miner, we see first of all the miner internals, which are kind of poor. There is just the window to let us know that this will be producing 60 ore per minute, it will consume 5 megawatts per second, and then a button flip switch. Is that clickable? Usable? Maybe. All the other machines have this button as well, but Jace never presses on it or comments on it. It would be reasonable to assume though that we could press that button and thus turn the machine off without having to do any hardware changes to the grid. We also see the inventory where we can make out a probable chainsaw, a rebar gun, 50 Simons for when you want to delay production, 20 boxes of spanners, and then an item that I'm not familiar with. It almost looks like something between the portable miner and the turret, but turrets are out of the game. I've been thinking a lot about this, and then many days after, it hit me. Jace cheated with power. He did not bring power in here. He chose a spot that is secluded, as I could not see past the rims of this valley. Believe me, I tried. So how did he come in? Could this be the jetpack then? Maybe, could be. Or I'm wrong, and I've been wrong many times before, so why not? Moving on. The rest of the icons are from products we will see a lot of. Rods or cement. This name I know because of something that happens later in the video. Plates, screws, cable, again as with cement, the video tells us the name. And then something not mentioned before or used anywhere in this demonstration. It's almost like a spool of wire or a magnetic coil of sorts, but sizes can be misleading. Let's say it's a coil. Looks more like a coil. Moving on, Jace goes to build something and the build menu opens to the special category where we see the hub. Jace even mouses over it and we read the heart of your factory. This is where you complete fix-it milestones to unlock additional blueprints of buildings, vehicles, parts, equipments, etc. This is a great piece of info. The heart of your factory, where all research is happening. Also, research in Satisfactory is called reaching a milestone. Does that mean that my progress is monitored and when stuff happens I can progress? Do I unlock them like that? Is it a quest? Build so many of this building or produce this much per second or have a storage full of something. Many of these are great guides in the process of teaching you the game, or it could just be like Factorio and we need special research production of sorts. However, this is where it all happens, the hub. Additionally, the design of the hub makes me think it's immense. After having spent so much time looking at this and other videos, I believe this is the first evidence of the drone. Points that draw me to it. For one, the staircase is tiny. Yes, again, using staircases, but just look at this. The staircase is so tiny and the building is so big. It doesn't make any sense for the staircase to change scales, so this needs to be in line with everything else we see. So by that scale, the two prongs behind it are power connectors, as we will continue to see further down. And then the massive structure in the front is the drone. Take a look at this shot from the reveal trailer. The characteristics are identical. The slanted lines, the supports, the extensions, and the box in the bottom of the drone itself with the jetpacks. Everything matches. So the drone comes with the hub. Why? Well, 5 days later and I still cannot formulate a theory I like. So I move on. In that construction window, we see some categories. Special, which only holds the hub currently, and we'll keep on saying currently as we do not know what level of research Jace is in this video. The production, logistics, power, and organization. Jace goes in the power section where we see the biomass burner, which he will build, but also the power pole and power line items. These are already in his action bar, as are the belt and what we find later to be a belt pole. As Jace mouses over the burner, we read, burns various forms of biomass to generate electricity for the power grid, has no input and must therefore be fed biomass manually. From this text we gather that there are many forms of biomass, maybe even living subjects such as Subnautica's biomass generator uses. We also get that this generator is fed manually as it lacks inputs, but other power generators will have inputs maybe? Is that the implication? So automatic power generation is possible, but not from the start. We also see in this picture that it will be making 20 megawatts, no idea though over what amount of time, so 20 megawatts per second, and that it will need 10 plates, 10 rods and 15 coils to be built. As Jace clicks on the burner to place it, we see the ghost of it, but also a little informational tooltip near it, signifying the cost of building. This is the same as we saw in the construction menu information sidebar, and after many observations to verify, the first number is how many of this item are in Jace's inventory at this time, and the second are how many are needed for the current construction. As Jace clicks to construct it, we can actually count the ingredients flying in. For example, coils. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 coils. Woohoo! Accurate building decorative details. As the build is over and Jace goes into its config menu, he mouses over the power indicators, which provide a mouse over balloon that read power consumption, how much power this machine consumes. Well, let's just call this bug number 2, as this is making power, not consuming it. Jace then goes around picking up leaves from the environment by pressing E and running until he disrupts the blind burn. Moving on. When Jace opens up the burner again and drops the leaves in, we see a notice: no valid manufacturer or extractor, which to me says that this is a warning that nothing is connected to this burner to draw power from. This is a hard-learned lesson from Factorio. Connect your power producers, always. Then, as Jace admits to being a dirty cheater,
I've used cheats to make my fuel last for, like ever.
I am wondering if those cheats will be available to the end user. Can I dare to hope that I'm gonna start seeing cheat modes in modern games? Perhaps. But my mind wanders as I see God rays in the top of the burner, and I'm reminded how much we have advanced in the graphics of modern games. As we continue and Jace goes to connect the burner to other entities, we see his action bar pop up on the power line number 2, so he must have pressed 2 on his keyboard. We also notice that the burner power indicator is now green, as it is making power and it is happy. As Jace goes to connect the power line to the burner, a power pole pops up briefly, and the building requirements jump up to include cable, coil, rod and cement. Not just cable anymore. But then Jace connects the power line to the miner and the cost is only 2 cables. Sometime later, Jace will flip over the power pole in his inventory, and we can see what the power pole requirements are. The 3 coils, the 1 rod and 1 cement is exactly the difference between that and the power line. So my mind right now goes to a dual mode of deployment. If you click on a building, the line will connect, and you can connect the line to a second building. But what if you don't want to? Or what if there is a length limit and you can't? What if I want to bring power to a faraway miner or outpost? Will that just be one long-ass power line? It cannot be. No game has ever done that. It doesn't happen in real life. So then it must be that when you drag a power line, you can also drop a power pole down on the ground. So actually, the quick access icon for the pole is strictly not needed directly right now. You could just work off the power line. Possibly. Well, Jace later demonstrates just this very fact. So there. Dual function confirmed. As Jace connects the power lines, we also notice that the lightning symbol on the resistors goes away, so we have that as well as an indication of lacking power. If you see a lightning symbol, that building doesn't have power. Also, the miner's power indicator is now green, as it has power and it can produce ore. Jace moves over to the belt, where we see that the belt costs just 1 iron plate. However, as soon as he places the conveyor belt to the output of the miner, the construction changes to include rods and cement. Having come this far with a power pole and power line, it's not too hard to imagine that this is the same thing. The slight movement Jace did triggered a placement for belt far away, and the conveyor belt now added a conveyor pole with button 4. This is the only reasonable explanation why a power pole would present itself when power line was selected, and why the costs jump when Jace still only has conveyor belt in his selected building blueprint. Jace, being a spoilsport, read good demonstrator, will later show this blatantly and negate my joy of having discovered this and bragging about it. As he continues, he connects the belt to another structure, and we notice that the building cost is now 7 plates. Easy to then figure out the longer the belt, the more plates it needs. As the belt is finished, we can see that we can actually press E to pick stuff off the belts, which is nice. However, as the camera pans, we see that the building is still in red power indicator. Jace opens the configuration panel for the smelter, which we can see named as we approach, and sets the recipe. We note that the window is very similar to the assemblers. 2 tabs, a recipe, and mousing over the ingot shows us information for it. Jace then drops another clue that he might not have all the tech for the game opened, as he verifies that smelters can do more than just iron.
Smelters can do more than just iron ingots. They can only just do that here in this example.
Clicking the recipe sets the production for this structure, and we get to see the production tab where all the information about consumption and production rates are visible. We have discussed the rates though. but I note this along with other such windows here to show that the math is being done for you in these windows. Just like in the assembler, when Jace gets around to setting it, we can see that all the rates are there on the screen, making things easier to calculate. From now on, I will not show more of these windows as they are pretty much the same. One thing to note in this part of the video though, is that setting the iron ingot recipe to production does not warn you about power lacking. Jace in fact has to say that nothing is happening.
But nothing's happening. Why? Because of power.
To show us that the ore is not being taken in.
In fact, it's not even taking anything in.
And then to open the window again for the warning to be seen on screen. This is a peculiar thing, which I would classify as a bug, and that's number 3. So Jace then goes to connect the smelter to the burner, but cannot, as he demonstrates that only one connection is allowed per building, or rather per resistor, as we saw the hub has 2. So then he moves to deconstruct the power line, as he needs that one connection. During this deconstruction, we notice that we are being told that we received 2 cables back. So this is where I know that the item is called a cable. Now Jace demonstrates that the building of a power line also includes the building of a power pole. As Jace explains that power poles have 4 connectors, and that is why we need them, as we can connect multiple structures that way, he also says,
and the cool thing about power poles is they have up to 4 connections. This one does. This one does.
Which then has to mean that there are more than one type of power poles, and that other milestones will let us have a power pole with a different number. Maybe less, maybe more. Maybe it's a long-range power pole with 1-to-1 connections, or a power pole with more than 4 connections. Regardless, there is more than one type of power pole. As Jace goes on to connect all the buildings in this demo, we see that even power lines cost different amounts based on distance. Burner to pole is 1 cable, pole to miner is 2 though, and then pole to pole it's 1 cable again. However, we then notice something weird. The structures to the south, let's say, of the smelter remain flashing red in their power indicator. They have power, why are they not turning another color? In any case, Jace shows that this smelter has been making iron ingots, and we see that there is internal storage for this material, both for the resources and for the products, of at least 17. Yes, it is easily assumed information, but dare I say that no one could guarantee that the output could go as high as 16. It could very well be that it could have stopped at 5 or 10, and who would say that was wrong? Next, Jace introduces the buildings as constructors and proceeds to connect them. He then sets the recipe, but we do not get a glimpse for the power indicator in between. Moving on, we go to another constructor which has also a red power indicator and connects that. Now we do see that the power indicator is still red, so power and connected input is not enough to change colors. However, the constructor before that is now green. As Jace sets the second constructor to screws and he moves off, we see that the power indicator is now yellow. Progress! So, powered and connected and recipe set might be yellow. Yellow for all good, but I have no resources, maybe? Since we are on the subject of power indicators, let's just finish this. Just before Jace connects the output of the screws constructor, we see that the power indicator is green, so the output is not important for the color turning green. Trying to see the power indicator of the assembler, we observe that the LOD might be interfering with this, as in a few shots before we could see no power indicator of the assembler, but as we approach it now we can see it there and being red. Jace proceeds to set the recipe in the assembler and wait for a screw to come in. However, we do not get a clear shot of the power indicator until he connects the second input, and after a few seconds we see the indicator flashing yellow. With that data I am formulating the following theory. Red color is for when we have no power, or we have no input, or when we have no recipe. Any of these can be fulfilled and the light will still flash red. The smelter taught us that input connected and recipe set but no power connected, the light is red. The constructors taught us that only power connected, the light is red. And now the constructor taught us that input connected and recipe set and power but no resources, the light is yellow. The miner is always input connected and has resources available as it is built on an iron patch. So all of this makes a matrix of logical steps supporting this theory. Red light for any of the 3 lacking: power, connection to input, and recipe set. If all of these are met and there is no resources to fulfill the recipe, then the light is yellow. When all 4 are satisfied, we have green light. Phew, that was a lot. Break? Back to work. Jace shows us what we saw before, that you can pick stuff up from belts, so confirmed working. As he moves on connecting structures and setting recipes, I am reminded of the long conveyor belt from a trailer and how that build is like. Definitely needed to be seen from a longer build to have that sense for me. We then have a greater sense of how far belts can be targeted, as Jace attaches one to the assembler, which is rather far from you, or at least this is the longest distance we have ever connected the belt to up until now in this video. We now get to the assembler production window, and this is the first time I noticed the math being done and then went back and saw it in all the other buildings. These 180 screws really jumped out at me, and then I sat down and did the math, and indeed this is what this factory needs per minute. This also led me to stay and take note of the screws coming in, as Jace waits for them. The requirement is 30 screws. I was wondering how many a box of them might be. 20? 10? Well, no. It's 1. Each box is 1 screw, and the assembler needs 30 of them. I begin having doubts that this would be possible to be kept going as is. We later find out, though, for sure. Jace starts planning for the iron plates and confirms that miners can only be built on specific patches. As he says,
Then, if we had a different resource node here, we could build 2 miners, 2 smelters, and just do it like that.
so this one patch we saw there can only serve 1 miner. Look out for more patches then when you need more miners. Following up, we see the logistics tab in the construction menu, where we notice conveyor pole multi, conveyor pole, conveyor belt, conveyor splitter, and conveyor merger. We can even see the text for the splitter, which reads splits conveyor belts in 3, useful to move parts and resources from oversaturated conveyor belts. The implication here is that there is no guarantee or preference about fair splitting or sorting, but instead it is a base model that will allow one incoming belt of resources that are not moving to split off and supply another production line. This is the case here as well, as the miner produces 60 ores per minute, but only 30 ore are consumed per minute by the smelter. So we do not need, in fact, a second iron ore patch. We could have split off the exit of the miner to 2 smelters. Then we would be consuming 60 ore per minute, balancing it out. As Jace goes to place the splitter, we see evidence of the splitter sticking to the placed conveyor belt. True to form, Jace later also explains that the splitter can be free placed or actually triggered onto the belt to stick on it, thank you very much. Then we see that we could ping a position, and that ping also produces a compass indicator. Sadly, nothing further is ever mentioned ever. I mean, this is a cool thing to have in a multiplayer game. I want to guide my friends somewhere, so pinging is important. Do we get to choose color? Is it assigned or customized? What are the 2 figures on the top of the compass that have been driving me nuts to the point of actually mapping them? They appear to be moving, so what? Are they actually running a multiplayer game? Or is it the icon a placeholder and these are actually vehicles? Anyway, Jace then decides to show the conveyor pole, and it is here that he names the item we spoke of before as cement.
Conveyor belts cost actually just iron plates, but you'll see iron rods and cement.
He goes on to explain that conveyor belts need to be connected to buildings or other conveyor poles. That building the belt and belt pole is similar to building the power line and power pole. So he demonstrates how to build a conveyor pole, showing that we can choose to build one without the accompanied belt. And more importantly, that the conveyor poles can increase in height as they are being built. Then he also confirms that the belt building cost is distance based and shows that there is a limit. Based on frame by frame viewing, the limit is somewhere between costing 23 and 28 plates. As Jace finishes the connection, he jumps on the belt, which actually carries him. However, the belt pushes Jace faster than it pushes the products on it, and Jace mistakenly theorizes that belts push people faster than metal. He's not good at analyzing. Then we have a point of interest in that Jace opens the production screen for the assembler. It is holding 161 screws. So here's where things get good. Taking the timecode of that frame and subtracting the timecode of the first frame that the assembler has 1 screw, we get 2 minutes and 40 seconds difference. That means then that the bandwidth of incoming screws is 160 per 2 minutes and 40 seconds, or 160 screws over 160 seconds. Belts then can carry screws at the rate of 60 screws per minute, or belts carry items at the rate of 60 items per minute. But the reinforced iron plates require 180 items per minute to keep on working. That isn't the answer to the question we asked some time before. There is no setup with Jace's current tech level that can keep this assembler producing without pause. Maybe the next level belt will push 120 items per minute, and the third one will be 180 items, or maybe even 240 items per minute, depending on what progression Coffee Stain are going for, linear or geometric. Point is, we need faster builds to make this work without a pause. It's not about the factories. The next shot of the production screen of the assembler is also where I noted another peculiarity of production calculations. When the production is triggered, the resources are not consumed. In Factorio, when you start production run, the materials are gone from the resource space, and then the progress bar moves, and after the bar is full, the product shows up on the output box. But here, the production starts and the resources are not consumed at the moment the production starts. Going back to other screens, we see that when the bar completes, resources are consumed. Then Satisfactory is only consuming materials at the moment of production completion. Why that was done, I don't know. But we can now add this to the way things work in Satisfactory. The next building to be named is the storage container. I do hope someone is keeping track and will update the wiki. Many of the things in this video did not make it there, and I cannot believe I'm the first to notice them for so long. After all, this video was released ages ago. We then see the storage container's inventory screen, which has two buttons allowing you to take all the items in the container or put all your items in the container. That's a safe bet. Jace then says that his factory is not efficient. Moving on. We notice the organization tab, where the only item in it is the storage container, but again, maybe only for now. We then see that the containers can actually be stacked. That's a bonus. I love the vertical promise of this game. The verticality in Satisfactory is further demonstrated with the conveyor hole multi, which Jace will now use. At first, as he mouses over the item, we see the description reading supports up to 3 conveyor belts, useful to route conveyor belts in an even more controlled manner over long distances. Well, maybe the description is not as good as it might be, to me at least. This is shown later to be a stacker of belts basically, not a router of controlled long distance belts. Does that mean there is something more to them than just being a stacker of belts? What did the writer of this description know or have experienced that made him write this like that? Or her? Also, are those stairs at the side of the multi? Now, just in 2 frames, we see a line connect the multi with the constructor. We have been seeing these lines before throughout the video, but I never really noticed that they are connected to a building. So I go back to research, and this is what I call hints. They appear and disappear quickly, so they are fickle. They do connect with the constructor. Do they connect with something else? Looking for more instances, I find another shot when Jace demonstrates the splitters at the middle-ish part of the video. There the line is connecting to a constructor again, theoretically but perfectly valid, but then also goes on a seemingly right angle to connect to the smelter as well. The boundaries seem tight, and the effect only shows up when super aligned with something. Aligned. Is this an alignment lines tool thingy? Maybe. But if they are, how come we can almost see them moving? We get a much more pronounced view of this when Jace is building the storage containers later, where we see that the line moves a lot, or much more than an alignment tool should, at least for me. I'd argue that this is too much, but others might say it's okay, with some tolerances. We also see it later with the multi that the lines do connect the multi with the constructor, and from that shot I get a data point that the lines go to the center of the structure. Going back to all the other previous shots, that is confirmed. It's always the center. Further noting that this might be an alignment tool. But if it is, why is there no snap to it? If this is meant to align structures, why does it not lock in place from some range, like the snap the splitters had on the belt? Alignment aids are meant to help you align. The line seems much more of an indicator only than a snapping helper, and with such a low tolerance, occasionally, one could see this difficult to actually align if they choose to. Bottom line, I cannot be more sure than 95% on this, so it's just theory to me at this point. I could quite easily be seeing what I want and suffer from confirmation bias. In any case, moving on. We get a small demonstration of how to assign items to the action bar when Jace assigned the multi to the 5 key. He blatantly says so.
I'm going to set this to number 5 on my hotbar.
And we can even hear the keyboard sound.
5, 5, 5.
So no drag and drop to assign items on the action bar for Satisfactory. As Jace starts to connect the belts to the multi, we get a hint that there is a limit to how belts can be connected. The text below reads, "The conveyor belt has an invalid shape, so not everything is possible to be made. There are some constraints in what you can do. However, this is one of the very few intentional, or semi-intentional, instances of this happening I've noticed, so this limit might actually be very generous, or it could be the way the scenario was designed for it not to happen a lot. Even this happened due to Jace not being at the proper angle with the multi, so the game assumed he did not want to attach the belt at the other side." One more important thing is that Jace very briefly mouses over the belt icon icon in the construction menu at this point, and we get to read transports up to 60 resources per minute, used to move resources between buildings. So there. Direct confirmation of our previous calculations from counting timecodes. 60 items per minute for this belt. Ha ha. Jace goes on to design things, and he reaches a point where he needs to deconstruct a belt with items on it. Deconstructing the belts once again shows that you get full construction materials back, but also more importantly, you get what was on the belt, as Jace confirms with the roads that were on it. Then we see some more demonstration of long-range targeting, which is lovely to see. I'd hate to have to walk all over the factory and navigate even this location on the video to have to place the belts. Being able to do so from one position and far away, as Jace does, is good polish for this game. After some time, with all built and connected, Jace shows us he can climb up the stairs. Yay! And it's fast? He climbs stairs like people run, at least faster than I can run. Shit. But at least we can have a vantage point. Being able to climb up makes everything so much better when we observe the factory below us. That elevated position is higher than the power poles, and it really offers a great view. We are almost at the end here, and there are only a few points left to make, which are just quick ones. The containers can of course hold more than one product, the angle of the belts can be quite steep, and the merging cannot be proven to be balanced or not. The supply pressure might actually not be equal, so that's why we cannot prove it. The factory makes far too many screws and far too few rods and plates, so that can very well explain the unevenness of the materials merged on the belts that we observe here. There is one shot at the end where we see the resource pressure as Jace jumps up the containers in full view of the merger. The screws are coming in at 30 per minute, 60 from the belt out of the constructor, split evenly, so 30 items over 2 belts. And the rods and plates are at a much slower rate. Now observe, when a rod, plate and screw meet, the outcome is predictable. The difference in timing of entry is reflected by the appearance timing. First the rod in and first the rod out, then the screw in and the screw is second on exit, and then finally the plate. Unless we see this with fully compressed belts, we cannot state something about the fairness of the merger. And that is the end of the video. A lot of things to go over for sure, and some very good mechanics in place. I don't know how stuff works in this alpha, but this showing here was great. I would not call this an alpha, this is like many betas I've played. If this is alpha, what is beta or release going to be like? Anyway, thank you for joining me for this video, I hope you had some fun, and keep safe.